At Pan Am 360, we welcome Steve Lehman, who is going to perform at the Festival de musique actuelle de Victoriaville on May 19, Sunday night at 8 p.m. He's coming with Sélébéyone. Is that the right pronunciation? Sélébéyone?
Yeah, I think so.
So, Steve, you're a saxophonist, you're a composer, band leader, a teacher, also a theoricist. You're interested very, very much in cross-pollination of genres, and mainly with improvisation music, contemporary jazz, free jazz, and also hip-hop, and also West African music, if I understand. So this project gathers all those cultures, and it's quite different, if I can put it that way, that what we hear about the fusion with hip-hop and jazz. People think always about Kendrick Lamar, Kamasi Washington, Thundercat, and those guys from the West Coast. And they're playing mainly early 60s acoustic black jazz with hip-hop most of the time, or funk, or also, or they're quite influenced by Jay Dilla, and also all the hip-hop of the 90s and the 80s. But in your case, this is different. And I'd like to know, what is your own description of your craft?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think with any project I'm involved in, I'm always interested in kind of making it as personal and distinctive as possible. And the mind reels a little bit, but I'm a West Coast guy now too. I've been living in Los Angeles for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So all the people you mention, or most of them, Steve Bruner, Thundercat, and Terrace Martin, and Robert Glasper, Kendrick Lamar, I don't have any personal connection to him. But they're all artists that I really respect and admire a great deal, and some of whom are close friends of mine. I think when I think about Sélébéyone, what makes it different, or maybe even beyond talking about difference, what I think is sort of fundamental to the project is that we really had, since the beginning, a lot of time and investment of time to kind of develop music together. So it's not a situation where we showed up in the studio one day and kind of figured out what we could get done in 12 hours or in 2 days. We did several residencies and workshops together and really developed things together. The other element that seems to be somewhat distinctive in this project is that all of the kind of compositional responsibilities, whether it be drum programming or sequencing or work with electronic sounds and samples, or writing for acoustic instruments and kind of developing rhythmic structures and harmonic structures, it's all done by the same person. So it's really integrated. Whereas I think in many cases, there's more of a kind of division of labor where musicians that are, whether they be saxophonists or pianists or playing acoustic instruments, kind of handle that aspect of the music, and then someone else, maybe a hip-hop producer, a lyricist, maybe handles something else. But in our music, everything's very integrated, and I think that allows for a great deal of detail and specificity and nuance on every level of the music. So that, you know, it's something we're proud of, and that as a kind of work in process that we continue to try to develop and cultivate.
Yes, we observed that the harmonic choices, the rhythmic choices are not, you know, that usual for the normal funk, jazz, R&B jazz, or hip-hop jazz listener. You're interested to more complex rhythmic patterns, polyrhythmics, also harmonically. Sometimes it's atonal. It's not only in the post R&B jazz current. It's quite different. It's more open to contemporary music, to modern, more, I would say, quote unquote, serious music. Comes from European traditions, and also, of course, from jazz. This has a different angle then. So would you agree with that, or what would you add? What would be your own comment about this quest?
Well, yeah, it's really interesting to think about. It's hard for me to, we're kind of forced, all of us are forced into kind of speaking in generalities for, just for convenience sake. I think, I think there are very active and inspiring experimental communities in all musical genres, whether it be hip hop or Western European classical music or jazz or on and on. So I don't, think of experimentation with harmony as being, the domain of Western Europe only, because it's certainly, they're very good at that in that tradition, but but there's also, I can think of, probably you could too, of producers that are more closely associated with hip hop who also do very innovative kind of work with the way that harmony works. And so I think ultimately, I'm a kind of a product of my own personal history, and I'm so proud, really, to be somebody that studied closely with Jackie McLean, and somebody that studied closely with Tristan Murail, and somebody that has a long partnership with H Prism, who's one of the MCs in the group, who's a founding member of Antipop Consortium, the experimental hip hop group, and Anthony Braxton and George Lewis. Those are all, relationships that I cherish, on a human level, and also for the musical kind of information that it opened me up to. So I think it's probably natural that a lot of that comes across in the music. But I think one of the sort of threads of continuity amongst all of those people was a real emphasis on focusing on, the sound and the kind of nuts and bolts of the music. So that's something, I'm not somebody that sets out to kind of combine musical genres or to fuse them together because I think it's fun. It's more that there are certain ideas about rhythm or certain ideas about harmony or about the saxophone or whatever that are really interesting to me. And I find examples of them across, all different kinds of musical traditions. And so I try to sort of peel away, kind of historical baggage or received notions about musical genre and really kind of listen to a piece of music regardless of what it is and think, well, what's going on with rhythm in this piece? What's going on with improvisation? What's going on with harmony? And figure out if there's something that I can connect with and learn from,
Yeah, of course, it's not a plan. It happens with your own instinct in a way. You're a product of yourself, as you said. It's your own unconscious history that re-emerged in a way in your composition, which is the artistic process for all good creators. So,
that's right.
And now let's talk about your collaborators that will come in Quebec. So there's Gaston Bandimic and Maciek Lasserre and DAMION REID. So those three guys are very important for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. And don't forget about Kyle, H Prism, Kyle Austin, as the fourth person. Yeah.
So let's talk about those guys.
Okay. Well, let me see. DAMION REID is really virtuosic drummer. I think really widely celebrated. Somebody I've been working with for about 20 years. We first met in Brooklyn, and I think he's known for being kind of a technical virtuoso, and also for somebody. He was on the first recording actually with Robert Glasper, where they experimented with sort of translating some of the rhythmic techniques of Jay Dilla's production to acoustic instruments. So he's really the first drummer to sort of kind of explore that process, and I think was a big influence on a lot of others. So he's really integral to the music. Maciek Lasserre is a wonderful saxophonist and composer who composed half of the music on both of our CDs, who's based in Paris. And we first met in New York when he was briefly a student of mine, and had been doing a lot of work already with lyricists and MCs from West Africa and Senegal in particular, which sort of led to our collaboration on this project. And then Gaston Bandimic, I was introduced to him through Maciek, the other saxophonist, and he's kind of like he's a sort of full-fledged star celebrity in the world of hip-hop Galsen, or hip-hop in West Africa, where the primary language that's used is Wolof. And he's also very virtuosic and able to sort of write lyrics in all different kinds of rhythmic settings and adjust his cadence and delivery of lyrics to kind of be informed by very specific compositional structures. So he's really integral to the project. And then H. Prism, who I mentioned earlier, is founding member of Antipop Consortium, and another really brilliant lyricist who, just like Gaston, is really adept at kind of composing lyrics and adapting them to all kinds of different sort of musical structures. So yeah, it's a great group.
Yeah, it's a great group, and all those personalities are very strong. Even
right.
You know, from West Africa, Gaston is bringing something else, because we don't know that much this rap done in Wolof.
That's right.
While in French, in the French Quebec, we know it because we have a connection with French Africa. But in the United States, it's not that obvious, I suppose.
That's right. Yeah, and I knew, I'm not an expert, but I knew certainly of West African rappers. Probably in Paris or in France, the most famous for a long time was MC Solar.
MC Solar, yes, of course.
But I believe he mostly rapped in French.
Yeah, he always rapped in French. He's not. His parents are African, but not him. He doesn't speak African language, and he just speaks French.
I see. So yeah, it was a new kind of universe to me, and Maciek Lasserre, the other saxophonist composer, was more connected to it, and he's really the one who sort of introduced me to that musical community.
Oh yeah, cool. And about the the evolution of the process with those guys. So can you just describe how you met them, how you did decide to work with them, and what happened after when you started to work? So let's have a sort of small story of the process.
Yeah, it's I'll try to keep it succinct, so nobody falls asleep. I think I had been working with H. Prism for now it's been about 20 years, since 2006, and was really a big fan of his work with Antipop Consortium. Yeah. So much so that I sent him a kind of remix that I did of an a cappella track that I found, and said, I'd love to collaborate. Here's some ideas that I have around a piece that you recorded. And he, related to it and said, yeah, let's do it. But at that time, he was really focused on live electronics and not so much his work as a lyricist. And I myself was also just starting to get very interested with computer music and interactivity, and a program called Max MSP. So a lot of the work we did for about 10 years was just live electronic sets or beat sets. And I had sort of in parallel known Maciek, had given him some lessons. He had asked me to be a guest soloist on a recording he did in 2011, which featured a Senegalese rap duo called Da Brains. And I really was excited by the direction and told him, this is really special and unique, and you should, keep going further with this. And then a grant opportunity emerged, sort of for collaborations between French and American artists. And I reached out to Maciek and said, would you be interested in kind of pursuing this direction collaboratively? And he was. And we received the grant, and I brought in H. Prism. He brought in Bamar, who goes by Gaston Bandimic, and we started working together. You know, it was a lot of kind of composing sketches, trading ideas via email, and then we eventually all convened just outside of Paris in Montreuil for about 7 days, and kind of, you know, worked sort of nonstop, and presented a concert. Did the same thing in New York a few months later, and then did a recording. And you know, the first recording we did was very, very well received. So we were able to do a lot of touring based on that, and that's kind of the history of the group.
Yeah. So half of the group is based in Paris, if I understand.
Well, that's right, except that now we're originally half of us were in New York and half of us were in Paris. Mm-hmm. Now it's even more spread out than that. I live in Los Angeles. H. Prism is sort of on the East Coast around New York, and Maciek continues to live in Paris, and Gaston has since moved back to Dakar.
Oh,
so
yeah.
We're all spread out now.
Cool. At the same time, now we don't need to be at one place since a long time now. You can create with the new tool since 20 years now. It's changed all over. So, but you gather once in a while for touring and also for recording. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We were able to get together for touring, and rehearsing also is important, and recording and stuff like that. So yeah, we're lucky that we've been able to do it. And I think it's also, you know, as we get older, I think it's maybe a generational thing too. As you get into your 30s and 40s, people sort of spread out a little bit and and have other responsibilities and families and stuff.
Families, like for example, or jobs.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting contribution, because this is a different lineage. This way, the way you do it, it's more adventurous. Well, it's at the same time you keep the beats, you keep the aesthetic of hip hop and the groove, but at the same time you add something more. I would say more complex. Well, in the common listener will find it sometimes maybe more weirder for us, but at the same time, this is the next step to understand if we are open to new forms of jazz, new forms of improvisation music, live electronics, as you say, because electronic is quite important in your craft, and also Western African music, and also hip hop. So there's a lot involved, and it is different from the rest. Well, you know, I know very well what happened on the West Coast since 15 years, and also with the Brain Feeder label, the Flying Loaded things, and as you said, you mentioned all those guys like Terrace Martin and Kamasi. We all know those guys, and some are your friends, as you mentioned. Yeah. So congratulations for this step.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Yeah, all those guys are great. I think in terms of the West Coast community of artists, I feel maybe more a connection to the lineage of groups like Freestyle Fellowship was a group with AC Alone and Micah 9, who I've been able to do some work with since I moved out to Los Angeles. And they, from very early on, were kind of doing experiments with very unusual rhythmic structures. And you have some of that in the Bay Area as well. More recently, this group Clipping with David Diggs and the hieroglyphics and things like this. And on the East Coast, Antipop Consortium I keep mentioning, and Company Flow, of which LP was sort of like the sort of main producer. So those are sort of for whatever it's worth, I guess maybe more in terms of the aesthetic, but also in terms of some of the experimentation with rhythm and harmony. Those are sort of traditions that were put in place maybe in the mid 90s that, you know, still are ones that I relate to. I think a lot of us relate to a lot, in addition to more recent trends that you mentioned.
Fine. So we're looking forward to have a great pleasure listening to your music live in Victoriaville on May 19th, a Sunday, 8 p.m. at the Festival International de Musique de Victoriaville. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate it. Looking forward to, maybe I'll see you at the hotel breakfast.
Of course, we'll meet each other there.
Okay, sounds good.
Ciao,
okay,
ciao.
take it easy. Peace.
Take it easy too. Bye. Peace.